welcome to 1861, the North Central College podcast. On today's episode, our third episode, we're joined by Wayne Randazzo, class of 2007. Wayne, so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you having me on and getting to talk to you again.
So Wayne, I'm going to start out. We always want the audience to hear from you and your words what you're doing right now, but I thought that I would help with some props. So why don't you tell me why I am wearing Los Angeles Angels gear for this particular episode, sir?
Well, not too many people in Naperville wearing Angels gear, I don't think, but I am the television voice of the Los Angeles Angels for their local TV broadcasts out in California. And also I am the announcer for Friday Night Baseball on Apple TV. They do a Friday night game of the week and, get to go around the country and call whichever game that they pick for that week.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Wayne, I'll say it's been really a lot of fun watching your journey. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how it got started after you left North Central?
Well, it actually got started, I think, during my time there. When I transferred there, I went to Arizona State at first. And I transferred to North Central, and then I wanted to get an internship somewhere that was worthwhile, and I got one at WGN radio, and was able to kind of mix my schooling with my internship, which was a kind of a intensive one. I was there from like 12 to 9 every day, Monday through Friday, and plus going downtown and coming back too. So there were a lot of long days, and I would take some classes in the morning and do the internship and all that. So it was kind of where things got going, though, because being at WGN gave me a lot of good experience out of the gate. I think I was a junior at North Central, and then I got a job, my first job in broadcasting, about a month after the internship ended at a place called the Illinois Radio Network, and I was the morning sports anchor. So I did that job in the morning, starting at 4 a.m, and then I would drive to Naperville and go to class after that. So it was already ongoing, and then I started doing a little bit of baseball. There was a summer league team in the area called the DuPage Dragons. They played at Benedictine, and I got my first taste of baseball there as far as being a regular announcer for a team. And so I had enough experience to go get a minor league baseball job, which I did in Mobile, Alabama. And then I was there for a few years and came back to work at 670 The Score downtown, and also the King County Cougars out in Geneva. So I kind of got the ball rolling for everything. And from there I was able to build my resume, got some TV work with the Big Ten Network, with ESPN, and then I landed in New York with the Mets, and that was really kind of the big break.
So how did you end up then, Wayne, in Los Angeles with the Angels?
Yeah, I was with the Mets for 8 years, and I did radio mostly. I did some TV though too. I'd fill in on their broadcast, which is highly respected broadcast on the TV side as well. Filling in for Gary Cohen and working with Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling, some of those old Mets on the broadcast with them. So. I had a lot of things going, and being in New York was good because that's what the league was, and there was a lot of just a lot of eyes on the Mets all the time. So, Apple TV started doing their Friday night games in 2022, and I kind of said to them, they were looking for younger announcers, and I said, I'd like to do it if you get an opening. They didn't. I didn't get it at first, but they said they would consider me for fill-in. And there was an opportunity to fill in on a game very last minute, between the Mets and the Angels in Anaheim. And I did the game. The next, few weeks after that, the Angels reached out to me and wanted to meet with me. And at the end of the season, they offered me the job. But they said that basically the owner of the Angels watched that Apple game and said, whoever did that game, find out who it is and hire him to be our TV announcer. So, it really worked out. And then later that season, I called Albert Pujols' 700th home run on Apple, which people think is why the Angels hired me. It's not. It was already kind of done. Me doing that Mets Angels game earlier in the year, but Albert's 700th home run was a huge moment to be part of, and that kind of burst me onto the scene in some ways as kind of a viable big league baseball announcer. So and since then I've been doing the Angels and Apple every week, and it's been great. I mean, it's certainly the dream I had, maybe even at the peak of the dream that I had 20 years ago when I was at North Central, and it's happened.
Yeah, well, congratulations, Wayne, and thanks for telling our audience some of the background. Wayne, why baseball? In your role, you have choices, right? There are a lot of different sports to cover. So why baseball?
There was never a choice. If you look behind me, everything there is baseball. There was there
It's
was
great.
never a choice. It was all baseball. My daughter's crocheting these days, and she made me this baseball.
Cool. Awesome.
So it's always baseball. There's never been another one. Football and basketball. I've done a lot of those other sports. I've done some hockey. I've done boxing. They're fun, and I like being able to call games regardless of what sport it is. But there was no other path for me. I wanted to be in baseball. I love broadcasting, so I wanted to merge the two, and those were the only options I thought was to be a baseball announcer. So it's what I've wanted to do my whole life. I've never strayed from it. Even now that I've been a baseball announcer, for 17 years professionally, and in the major leagues for 11. It's the only place I want to be. So it's sometimes I think being close to it or being involved in something kind of turns you off to it, but it hasn't for me. I think I love the game as much now as I ever have, if not more. So it was always the one, and it remains that way.
Wayne, where did you were from the area? You were from not too far from Naperville, right?
Yeah, I went to high school in St. Charles. I grew up in Berwyn. Yeah.
Uh, so obviously you're the voice of the Angels, but did you have a baseball rooting interest when you were a kid growing up?
Yeah, I was a huge Cubs fan. I was watched them every day. I mean, it was I never missed a game from a very young age. My mom was a kind of a stay-at-home mom, and at that time, and then they didn't have lights yet. That when I was a kid, when I was really young, so they played every game during the day, at least the home game. So
Right.
I watched everyone with her, and then filled in on the night games. And then as I got older, I just stayed on it. I mean, I watched every single game. Glued to the TV, listening to Harry Caray and Steve Stone and whoever was in for Harry when he would do radio, and it was just it was always on. And then started watching other games around the league. The Braves had TBS on the Superstation, and the Mets still had their Superstation, and the White Sox were around
Yep.
too, of course. So there was, both leagues that I could watch. I mean, I was all about it. I went to the 19. I was thinking about the All-Star game the other day. The Major League All-Star game was a couple of days ago,
Yes.
and the Cubs are supposed to get. They haven't announced it yet, but they're supposed to get 2027, and they haven't had one since 1990. I was 6 years old, and I went to that All-Star game with my dad at age 6. So it's always been something that's been around me, and I was obsessed with it my whole life, and the Cubs were my team, and follow them as much as I could.
So I had the opportunity to listen to watch the game on the 4th of July. You did the Apple TV broadcast of a somewhat historic Cubs game.
Yeah, it was crazy. They hit 8 home runs in a game for the first time ever. They broke their record for most homers in a game. They were just crushing the ball against the Cardinals on the 4th of July, Wrigley Field. I mean, it was a perfect day, and to be kind of called into that one was unbelievable. I mean, what a day to be there, sold out, and the Cubs are doing everything they can to mash the Cardinals. It was a pretty good one, and it was funny to hear back. They posted a highlight reel of
Yes.
all 8 of the home runs, and a couple were mixed in with Pat Hughes, but a lot of them were my calls. And I love Pat. I think he's one of the great announcers of all time. He's someone I certainly have looked up to before I made this a career, and during my career as well. And to have my voice interspersed with his on Cubs highlights. Again, these are the ultimate dreams that I had. When I was younger and in college or wherever, and it's for them to happen the way that they have. I almost wish I would have dreamed even bigger. I mean, I've kind of reached pretty much all of the ones that I wanted. It's almost a lesson in dreaming as big as you can, because you don't realize how those things can kind of manifest into reality.
So, Wayne, you mentioned Pat Hughes, you mentioned Harry Caray. Were there some other broadcasters that you looked up to as you were growing into your career?
Yeah, I mean, there was always a lot. I mean, Tom Brenneman, I thought, was really, really good when he was with the Cubs when I was younger. Obviously, Pat. John Rooney, when he was doing White Sox games, was really good. He's still good on the Cardinal games now. I had lunch with Bob Costas last week, which was really cool. I mean, it was it was one of the all time greats, and someone who's about the top of the mountain in broadcasting. Al Michaels, who I have not met yet, but I would like to, certainly at the top of that list as well. Um, there was a lot of guys, and then when I got to New York, I knew Howie Rose, I knew Gary Cohen, I knew who they were. When I got there, I realized how incredibly good they are at what they do, and being able to be around them every day and learn from them and ask them questions, and be able to just kind of soak in everything that they knew was huge for me. I think it elevated me in just a way that would never have happened if I had landed with another team. So I owe a lot to Howie, especially, and Gary too. I mean, they're masters of the craft, and being able to be around them for 8 years was the ultimate, master's level course that I got for quite a long time with those two.
So, Wayne, there's a lot of folks, myself included, who watched you in your student days at North Central and at WONC, and I think to a person, we all said that's somebody to watch, and you've fulfilled all of that. Talk about the role that WONC played in your growth, the opportunities that you had there, and why that made a difference in where you are right now.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing was just having the accessibility to the platform. That the radio station was kind of wide open, and you could do as really what you wanted. John Madormo, who was running it at the time, was available, and he was certainly willing to help, and he was also pretty hands off. He would kind of sit up on his perch and he'd tune in, and he'd be there. And if you had a question, he'd answer it. But he was also not running in to
Right.
help you press the buttons or sitting next to you at the games. He kind of let the students really run it based on his guidance. And I think there were a lot of opportunities. If you would have gone to Syracuse or some of these other big broadcasting schools, you really wouldn't get on the air until the end, and you wouldn't be able to do the big games for the school until you're a senior and all that. And I didn't want to wait, and I thought it would be valuable to get on the air and do these things as soon as possible. Which I was able to do at WONC, and the opportunities were great. I mean, they did Friday night high school football, and they did all the North Central football and basketball and baseball and all that. So there were a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities to get on and get better, and certainly ask John what he thought, and he had a lot of good advice as well. So that's what was kind of unmatched in that regard, is that North Central had all of these ways for you to get experience without right there at the school. We did a couple of sports talk shows even, and we had a lot. I would book a lot of guests. That's one thing I learned at WGN, was how to book people for a show.
Yeah.
So We had all kinds of. We had Ryan Dempster when he was an active Cub, on our little sports talk show at our on our college station.
From the
Uh,
upper deck, right?
yeah, from the upper deck, and Harry
Yeah.
Callis came on, the old Phillies
Yes.
announcer who went to high school in Naperville. It was on our little tiny sports talk show. So I booked all these people to come on this show, and we had a lot of interviews. A lot of from a lot of different people that were in different walks of life and sports, and these were all things that beefed up and enhanced my resume, but just my experience level for when I actually did get a real job and was able to apply some of this stuff.
I'm hearing, Wayne, in your comments, the value of preparation. Talk a little bit about that. What you have to do to prepare now for a game, and what you learned as a student getting ready to do that preparation work.
Yeah, I think that's evolved over time in terms of what makes sense, and how to really prepare yourself in a way that works for you, and how you go about it. I've been blessed with a really good memory, so that helps in preparation. It helps with storytelling, because there's things that come up in a game that if you can recall something else. I remember listening to Pat in the 2016 World Series. There was that play where there was that pop up and like it bobbled and Rizzo caught it, and Pat immediately said that the same thing happened in the 1980 World Series with the Phillies, and Pete Rose and Bob Boone had a kind of a near collision and a bobble, and the ball was caught. And he said that play reminded him of that. And I think that kind of memory and being able to recall those things, makes you prepared. That Cubs Cardinals game you were talking about, how much do I have to sit here and type at the computer? I've been preparing for a Cubs Cardinals game at Wrigley Field my entire life. I don't necessarily need to type every single note. It's all there. And I'm able to recall it in the right moments. But as far as most games and most teams, I think you just read a lot. You try to stay on top of the league. We watched the All-Star game the other day as much for preparation for the next games as anything else. I mean, Schwarber wins All-Star MVP, and the Angels are playing the Phillies tomorrow. So, there will be a lot to drag back into that from the All-Star game when, seeing the Phillies tomorrow night. So, the preparation is all the time. Any little thing you read, any little thing you come across, and then the more extensive stuff where you will Google search and look on different platforms and read articles and that sort of stuff, and then at the game too, talking to people around the teams and players and that sort of thing. So, there's never an end to the preparation. There's never a time where you feel like you've got it. You just kind of keep adding and adding and adding to your database and go for it.
Wayne, were there any key moments when you were here on campus where you had some, maybe for lack of a sort of the aha moment, if you will, that I can do this? I know it was always your dream, but were there any moments when you were covering sports here as a student that you thought this is it?
I think when we started winning the awards, that was it. When we put in for the Illinois Silver Dome Award, when we won it, and then they put in for that CBI, a national award. I remember, I went twice. The second time I won, but the first time I didn't win. It was for the national award, and they gave you this little tiny kind of consolation award for being nominated. And the award ceremony was in St. Louis, and so I went down, didn't win, and then my mom wanted to take a picture with me and the trophy. I took it and I threw it. As soon as the picture was done, I threw it in the garbage. I didn't want to win the consolation one. Even on the national level, I thought I was good enough and should have won the main one. And the next year I did, and it was. Those were the moments when I thought that I was good enough to make it, to try to go for it, because I thought my stuff held up with anyone else's. And I still think that. I think it now too, that for any sort of job or any sort of thing that could open, that I feel like my stuff should be up there with anybody else's. And I think that's kind of helped me move forward and be determined and all that, because I just believed in my ability.
What advice would you give to students who are out there listening and hey, look, they want to be the next Wayne Randazzo? What advice would you give?
I think a lot of the stuff we said, believe in yourself, dream big, prepare, get experience, find your voice. I think that some of these things that have helped me are things that would help anybody. I think that it's not easy to do. Looking back, I wouldn't want to start over. That's for sure. Some of the ways that I got through don't even exist anymore.
Right.
There's platforms have changed so much, and the ways to kind of break through have changed a lot. It's important, I think, for announcers now that are up and coming, at least, to be on social media and to be kind of a presence there, and show your personality and build your following. I think that helped in New York when I was the radio pregame and postgame show host. There's not a lot of, when I first started, at least, there's not a lot of ways for you to become that well known with your audience. I think there's a way you can kind of be irrelevant in some way, just doing radio pre and post game and filling in on 20 games on the radio. So I used social media. I was really good friends with the sideline reporter, Steve Gelbs. We were on social media all the time, building our following, and it worked. The Mets fans knew who I was, and they knew Steve, and then they wanted to see us together, and it worked perfectly. And they, that built my following to a point where not only was getting attention because I was good at what I was doing, but Mets fans like me, so that pushed me there. That's Mets. Then I started doing games on TV more. Then I got bumped up to full-time play-by-play on the radio. So, and Mets fans still like me. When I do a Mets game on Apple TV, there's still a huge chunk of Mets fans that are happy that I'm back. So, it's something that I think paid off. And I think that if you're an up and coming announcer, you have to do it. You have to find your way on there. You have to send your tapes out. You have to get feedback. You have to network. I mean, there's so many things and you have to make good decisions. I think you have to, you're sometimes faced with, different paths, and you have to feel it out and make it how you think it should go for you. I remember ESPN 1000 offered me a job when I was 25. I might not even have been 25. I might have been 24. And I was working in Alabama doing minor league baseball. And I got a good job offer to come home and be on the air in Chicago at 24 years old, or I could stay in Alabama and continue broadcasting baseball and, kind of carve that out and make sure that I was as good of a baseball announcer as I could be while I had the time to do it. So, I think a lot of people would have chosen to come home and work on the radio in Chicago. It sounds silly that I didn't, but I didn't. I stayed in Alabama. I
Yep.
wanted to be a baseball announcer. I didn't feel like I was good enough yet to lean on it, because I was going to try to get baseball jobs even from ESPN 1000. I wouldn't have just stayed there. I would have continued to try to work in baseball. So, I stayed in Alabama, and, it was a choice that was right for me. And it wasn't, it wasn't more money in Alabama, that's for sure. It was only about getting experience and, doing the things that made sense long-term for my goals. So, all of those things come into play when you're trying to get your career off the ground. And I'm sure that's the case in any career, not just this one.
I can't help but ask, have you stayed in touch with North Central Athletics, things that are happening the last few years? Obviously, I had the joy of being a witness to the work that you did while you were a student, and you were certainly a North Central Cardinals fan. Have you paid attention to what's happening around here?
Yeah, I mean it's been pretty cool to see them, especially on the football team. Having becoming that kind of program. I mean, back then and still to some degree, Mountain Union was always in that championship game, and UW Whitewater and those kinds of schools. And North Central, when I was there, they were just starting to kind of get this some playoff. We did some playoff games, and we kind of
Yep.
started to see some of that come into fruition. But now that they're the dominant program and all that is pretty cool to see. And watching them on ESPN in those championship games, the Stag Bowl, at the end of the year is awesome, and it's great for the school and good for the program to come together the way that it has. And I think that they made it. Did they make a Final Four too? In
Yes. Yes.
basketball, yeah. So
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
being around those programs as much as I was then, it's great to see that it's all kind of come to pass in that way, and that they get to enjoy some success like that.
Wayne, you mentioned the 700th home run for Albert Pujols. You had the great privilege of calling that. Are there some other historic moments that you've been part of that you think about and are proud of?
I mean, that's one that Albert's only the fourth player to hit 700 home runs, and to be the first guy didn't. There wasn't even TV broadcast when the first guy did it, Babe Ruth. So
Yep.
there haven't been many chances for anyone to call a 700th home run, and that's one that will stand out, I think, always. The other kind of cool things that come across along the way. I mean, more individual performances. My first year with the Angels was Shohei's last year with them, and just being attached with my voice to what he was doing that year, still pitching as a regular starting pitcher at that time, which he's trying to do again, and hitting the way that he was. I mean, it was just kind of historic every time he was on the field as a two-way player. So, those are the moments that stand out. The Mets went to the World Series my first year there in 2015. Beat the Cubs. I always talk about kind of the moment. I was supposed to be doing the on-field interviews and stuff, and the Mets win the National League pennant at Wrigley Field. I mean, what a
Yeah.
place for me to be standing on
Yeah.
the pitcher's mound at Wrigley Field, watching the Mets celebrate winning the National League pennant and being happy that they did. I was
Yep.
excited to go cover them in the World Series, and I'd never really ever been to a World Series game, let alone having credentials to one. So it was exciting. And then Pete Alonso broke the rookie home run record in 2019 for the Mets. I got to actually call the home run that gave him the Mets single season record and the rookie record as well that year. So there's a lot of fun moments that have come up, and hopefully there are a lot more ahead.
First memory of North Central.
I would say, just kind of showing up there. I think it was the fall of 2004 when I started going there. It was a serene and kind of calming fall like presence. It was a nice place to walk around and to be a part of, kind of tucked in there and alongside downtown Naperville. And I think most of my memories there revolve around that little house where the radio station was and still is, and being kind of a part of that was huge for me. And I think a lot of my time at the college was spent there, and it was those were all the memories are for me.
Final question, Wayne. We always give our podcast guests an opportunity to give a shout out. Anybody that you want to say thank you to or acknowledge, the floor is yours.
Well, I think obviously John Madormo stands out as the one that kind of shaped things over there as far as the radio station, and made it a good environment and a place for people that not only wanted to do it, but that liked it as a hobby too. He was welcoming to the ones who had no career aspirations for broadcasting, but thought it was neat to be on a radio station for a little bit, or neat to play music or whatever. I mean, he kind of kept the door open for everyone, whether they had serious intentions about broadcasting, or just wanted to kind of peek their head in, which I thought was cool. I thought that was a good thing for everyone. So he kind of stands out. Certainly, I think it was some of the friends I made that I still keep in touch with. Nat Garofalo, who I knew since I was 5 years old, and was the one who was there first, and said, you're thinking about transferring, this is a good place to do it, because they have the kind of broadcasting link. You'd be surprised how much they've won awards and have kind of built this program. And he was right. I was surprised, and I didn't realize, I never even really heard of it until I was looking for a different school to come to. And there was one that kind of fit what I was looking for perfectly, right in my backyard, essentially. So there's a lot of people along the way, and you guys in the sports departments and in the alumni departments, and the and two, I think kind of allowing me some freedom back then too. It was trying to put a career together is not just about going to every single class and getting straight A's, and there's kind of some real life experience that needs to happen. And I think that was way more valuable, than making sure I was in every class and making sure I got the best grades. Having the experience and being allowed that kind of flexibility at the time was big.
Sage advice and commentary from somebody who's doing it at an elite level. Wayne, I'm so grateful. I know that you have a busy schedule. Grateful that you've given us your time to be on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate getting to look back and talking to the folks at North Central, and hope this helps. And I always say, if people are at the radio station or trying to do this over there, if they want to reach out to me for some advice, I'm happy to do it.
Really appreciate that. I'll tell you what, it's not very often that I wear an Angels hat, but the next time you're through on campus, I'm going to ask for a little Wayne Randazzo about right here. How's that sound? Is that a deal?
Sounds good.
That's a deal. Wayne Randazzo, our guest, class of 2007, the television play-by-play voice of the Los Angeles Angels, on episode 3 of 1861, the North Central College podcast. Until next time, thank you everybody for listening and watching.